Hi, I'm a 35-year-old woman, and I'm feeling conflicted about a decision I made that's caused a lot of family drama. My sister Laura, her husband Tom, and their two kids have been living with me and my husband Dan for almost a year, and things recently reached a breaking point. Let me give you some context. Laura and I have always been close, but we've always had different personalities. Laura is laid back, spontaneous, and a bit of a free spirit. I'm more structured, a planner by nature, and a bit of a perfectionist. Growing up, Laura always joked that I was the mom of the siblings, constantly organizing things and reminding her of deadlines. I never minded it, though. It's just who I am. When Laura hit financial troubles last year, I didn't hesitate to help. After all, she's my sister. A year ago, Laura's husband Tom lost his job unexpectedly. He worked in sales, and his company had a massive round of layoffs. Laura only worked part-time at a small boutique, and with two young kids, their expenses quickly piled up. They couldn't make rent, and they were on the verge of eviction. Laura called me in tears, asking if they could stay with us temporarily, just a few months, until they got back on their feet. Dan and I don't have kids, and we have a spacious home with a finished basement that includes a bedroom and bathroom. It seemed like the perfect setup. I spoke with Dan, and we both agreed to help. Dan was hesitant at first because he values his space and routine, but he knew how much Laura meant to me. We set clear boundaries. They'd have their own space in the basement, and we'd all contribute to keeping the house clean and organized. At first, things were fine. They were incredibly grateful, and everyone made an effort to get along. But as the weeks turned into months, the arrangement started to feel less temporary. Tom made minimal effort to find a full-time job. He occasionally picked up freelance work, but spent most of his time watching TV or playing video games. Laura picked up a few extra hours at work, but it wasn't enough to make a dent in their finances. Meanwhile, Dan and I ended up covering almost all the expenses: groceries, utilities, even some of their personal bills like car insurance. What made it worse was the difference in lifestyles. Dan and I are neat and organized. We like our house clean and tidy, and we have routines that work for us. Laura and Tom, on the other hand, are much more relaxed, borderline careless, honestly. Their kids are sweet but incredibly messy. Toys are constantly scattered all over the living room. Crumbs are left on the couch, and dishes pile up in the sink. Dan works from home, and the noise from the kids running around upstairs has made it almost impossible for him to focus on his job. Despite all this, we tried to be patient. We reminded ourselves that this was temporary, and they were family. The final straw came last week. Dan and I were celebrating our wedding anniversary. We didn't plan anything extravagant, just a nice dinner at home with good food, wine, and some quiet time together. I asked Laura in advance if she and Tom could keep the kids in the basement for a couple of hours, so we could have some privacy. She agreed and even offered to put on a movie for them. But not even 30 minutes into our dinner, the kids were upstairs, running around and shouting. Dan and I tried to ignore it at first, but it became impossible. I asked Laura again if she could take the kids back downstairs. She rolled her eyes and said, "They're just kids, Karen. You need to lighten up." I tried to let it go, but later that evening I overheard Laura and Tom talking in the kitchen. Laura said, "I don't know how Dan puts up with her. She's so uptight." Tom laughed and replied, "No wonder they don't have kids. She'd probably schedule their playtime down to the minute." Hearing that broke me. Dan and I don't have children, not because we don't want them, but because we've struggled with infertility for years. It's been a deeply painful journey for us, and it's not something we talk about openly. Hearing my sister and her husband mock us in our own home, knowing how much we've sacrificed to help them, felt like a slap in the face. The next morning, I confronted Laura. I told her I heard what she and Tom said and that their behavior was disrespectful and hurtful. I expected her to apologize, but instead she got defensive. She said I was overreacting and needed to learn how to take a joke. That's when I told her they needed to leave. I gave them 2 weeks to find somewhere else to stay. Now my family is divided. Laura called our parents, who are furious with me. My mom said I'm being heartless, and that putting a roof over families' heads should come with some grace. She even tried to downplay the comments, saying, "Laura didn't mean it like that, and you know how hard things have been for them." My dad thinks I should have just let it go for the sake of family unity. Dan, however, fully supports my decision. He says they crossed a line and took advantage of our kindness. I feel conflicted. I didn't want to kick them out, but I also feel like I deserve to set boundaries in my own home. So Aita for asking them to leave?